I wanted to put together a video about a utility class in Laravel called Timebox. I don't know how many people know that this exists, but I found it quite interesting. It's got quite a niche use case, but let's cover it here and I'll try and give you an example of where it might be useful. So if we read the docs, Timebox is a class that ensures the given callback always takes a fixed amount of time to execute, even if the execution finishes sooner. And it's particularly useful for cryptographic operations, such as user authentication checks, where attackers might try and exploit your app based on how long something takes to execute. If you look at the code example that the docs provide, we provide a closure to the Timebox call method, as well as a minimum execution time in microseconds. So I've got two artisan commands here. One is unboxed, and it just does a 2-second sleep. The other one is boxed. It also does a 2-second sleep, but we've got a 5-second minimum execution time, or 5 million microseconds. So if I run each one of these, and I'm just going to do this with the time command. So we'll do unboxed. And you see it takes 2 seconds to run. There's some bootstrap time there as well. But if we do the boxed one, we should see that it takes 5 seconds or more with the bootstrapping. We'll just give this a second to finish. There we go, 5.5 seconds. So the Timebox has made this run for at least 5 seconds. If we were to change that to 6 and rerun it, we'll see that it now should take 6 seconds because it exceeds the 5-second time limit. A more practical example of where you might want to use Timebox is something like this. Let's say you've got a modal on your website where the user has to enter their password to perform a destructive action, like deleting a resource. For security reasons, you're going to want to do that password check on the server. So you have an endpoint like this where you post the password, and during validation, you check to see if it matches the current password or the password for the current user. Now, depending on the length of the input provided, the duration of this function is going to change. So if your user's got a really long password, something super secure, it's going to take that little bit longer to compare the hashes. If your user has a short password, then it's going to run a bit quicker. Attackers will sometimes use this difference in execution time to determine how long a password is or how complex it is. With endpoints like this is where you should consider using the Timebox class. By wrapping it in a Timebox and adding a minimum execution time, in this case 500 milliseconds, regardless of the input length or complexity, the function is going to take a fixed amount of time or a minimal fixed amount of time to execute. So if your password is password, insecure, it will run for 500 milliseconds, but if your password is a bunch of random characters, it's also going to run for 500 milliseconds. That dramatically reduces the risk of an attacker finding a vulnerability or being able to sort of hard crack your password. That was a super quick and short introduction to the Timebox class. I found it really interesting and hopefully you did too. I didn't even know it existed until I came across it the other day. Hopefully now that you've watched this video, you can go through your own application and find a place where there's a potential for vulnerabilities, and perhaps the Timebox class will come in handy.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com